With Robin on the way, I thought it would be a good time to finally pay some respects to the follow-up playstyle, and stock up stellar Jades with the sponsor of today's video, Loot Bar. Loot Bar is a safe and cheaper option when it comes to buying your in-game currency. It takes the cheapest conversion currency rate and uses that for your top-up purchases. It's basically a middleman without potentially getting yourself in trouble with VPN usage. As a Star Rail creator, it gets really expensive to roll for every character, and I pretty much have to do so for these videos you're currently enjoying. Actually, at the time of you watching this video, I'm going to be using this as my top-up option to get Robin. The process is very simple. You click on March 7th, decide how much premium currency you're looking for, and then you add in your Star Rail UID after purchasing, and you will receive the said premium currency in a matter of moments. It's a very smooth and quick process. Loot Bar has allowed me to save a lot more, which in turn gives me even more saved up currency for Robin. It's a win-win scenario. The other cool feature of this is if you're a player that has never topped it before and has the additional currency bonuses, you will receive those too upon your purchase. Even more Jades for the upcoming characters. I'm definitely going to need them. What are you waiting for? If you want to get Robin just like me, just click on the link in the description below. Thanks again to Loot Bar for sponsoring today's video. Topaz is a hunt fire character known for her pure single target damage and key role in the follow-up attack playstyle. She has had a rather interesting history in Star Rail. Considering she released a lot later than many of the already pioneered playstyles, this character had a rough start when it came to her debut banner. With that being said, rather than focusing solely on Topaz, I thought it would be interesting to shift that focus on follow-up attackers as a whole, starting from the very beginning. Follow-up attacks were exclusive to only a few characters. At this point in time, the follow-up attacks lacked an identity and wouldn't be thought to be the playstyles known as today. Herta, Himiko, March, and Clara were the only characters that had a follow-up attack baked into their base kits. Another option did as well, but it was locked behind the gacha for additional dupes. The only characters that built their playstyle around the follow-up attacks would be Clara and Herta. The only reason I didn't mention Himiko is because it's conditional on the enemies having their weakness broken. March's was conditional on having a shielded character be attacked, but it was a minor part of the character's overall kit. Clara's only source of damage was from follow-up attacks from the Varrock counters. Herta's only condition would be getting the enemies below half health, which doesn't have elemental typing associated with it. It just really seemed like bonus damage for dealing damage. These characters would go on to be used with one another because they provided the teams they resided in with off-turn damage. The synergies we have for follow-up attacks didn't provide the same experience as it does in Star Rail nowadays. The most you'd have is a Click's auto-form follow-up attack loop that Herta and Himiko could perform if there were enough enemies on the field with ice and fire weaknesses. To the general player, this was cool, but little did the player know what was in store for them later on. Speaking of general, there would be the second limited character of the launch patch that had a follow-up attack in his kit also. Now to be quite honest, Jing's follow-up attack was a lot slower than the pre-existing characters and their follow-up attacks. This follow-up attack also had trouble synergizing with some characters. This instance would be referred to as backloaded damage instead. It makes a lot of sense given the backloaded damage acted as a separate entity while each other character with follow-up would do those attacks theirself. Despite all of this, comparative to the other characters, Jing's follow-up attack wouldn't be the biggest part of his kit, as his other damage sources would matter to his overall damage he dealt. That's all I will mention about Jing for now. A follow-up video is definitely needed, no pun intended. All of the characters at the time with follow-up attacks had one thing in common. Each and every single one of them had some form of AoE with set attacks, but we didn't have a single target damage dealer that provided to the playstyle. Blade releasing the first half of 1.2 had a follow-up attack of his own. That was in actuality a nice part of his kit, but it didn't shape his identity as being a part of that playstyle, because he wouldn't mesh well with the later release of Topaz. It wouldn't be until the release of Kafka 1.2 until we were to receive the first character with a single target follow-up attack. This was an enhancement of the character's own performance, and added absolutely nothing to the overall playstyle. Kafka's follow-up attack would allow the character to place a dot onto the enemy, and provided very little damage to the overall damage of Kafka. Pretty much 1% of that number. However, this follow-up attack that Kafka had would prove to be beneficial for when we discuss Topaz later in the video. You're currently seeing a reoccurring trend, that being characters having follow-up attacks added to the kit and not having any major role in the actual playstyle. It's essentially giving Asta and Himiko the dot they have in their kits. It just adds very little value to the overall performance as characters, which makes it hard to identify them as a part of the dot archetype. It wouldn't be until patch 1.4 where the follow-up attack playstyle started to actually come online and center more characters around that archetype. The very first character of that category was Topaz. The thing is about Topaz is that every single part of a kit is considered a follow-up attack. Her basic attack counts as a follow-up attack, taking advantage of damage bonuses, and her ultimate boosts the damage of 2 instances of her backloaded follow-up attack damage. The selling point of this character, however, would be the supportive utility she brought to the archetype in the form of a follow-up attack damage boosting debuff placed onto an enemy of her choosing. So not only did she offer nice personal damage for the overall team damage, but the follow-up attack characters discussed early in the video possess some synergy with Topaz, Blade being the least and Clara being the most of that bunch. Topaz's teams really depending on the secondary weakness of the enemy, because at the time characters like Ruan Mei hadn't existed. If the enemies were weak to physical, you would just bring Clara. If there were enemies weak to lightning, you could bring Jing and surprisingly Kafka. If the enemies were weak to only fire, then Himiko could fill in the gap herself. QQ could be used whenever there were enemies weak to Quantum, but it required Eidolon 4 and was heavily RNG gated. At that point, just use Silverwolf as she was the best in slot supporter for Topaz at the time. However, despite all of these unique teams that Topaz had upon her arrival, being the secondary banner of the Jinglu would contribute to her only downfall, as Hypercarry was still running rampant. It also didn't help that unlike every other damage dealer at the time, Topaz really had no 4-piece relic set she could use. But this was to change in a matter of weeks following the upcoming patch. Patches 1.5 not only released a brand new relic set, literally tailor-made for the follow-up attack archetype, but also a planar set made for Topaz's best buffer at the time, giving even further fire damage boost. This meant Topaz and other follow-up attackers were to see a massive damage increase following this patch, and boy did their teams begin to shred every bit of content. Topaz's best team would be her featured as a support for Jing hypercarry teams, because Topaz didn't provide too much damage in the overall team, but did skyrocket Jing's Lightning Lord damage. This was also the time where Kafka's identity as a dot character was solidified with Prisoner Relic set featured alongside the follow-up set. So that put an end to the short-lived Kafka-Topaz teams. To say the least, things were looking a lot better for the future of follow-up attacks, but Hoyoverse would have something else planned that in hindsight makes a ton of sense. Dr. Ratio being given to the play for free, I've stated in every video at this point, I know. The thing is, this was a contingent point in pretty much every history of every character, because this was the first time where a character as strong as he was became widely accessible. What this meant for Topaz mains was a best in slot damage dealer if your Topaz met the criteria. Did she have her 5-star light cone and or her first Eidolon? These would be very important as being debuffs that Dr. Ratio needed to function as a damage dealer. Nowadays, these issues are way less prevalent, but at the time, this was really a functionality issue. It was almost like paying for early access without knowing we received characters as being the solution to said issue. However, even in some circumstances, the two work together just fine. And in those same scenarios, the two would feel inseparable because of how they interact with one another. Dr. Ratio's follow-up attack could proc the follow-up attack of Topaz, which could then proc Dr. Ratio's follow-up attack once more depending on the ultimate usage, essentially creating this loop. This loop is oddly familiar to something we discussed early in the video. Now the duo wouldn't be complete with a best in slot Harmony character missing. She would come much later in the equation, but for the time being we had Ruan Mei, who was a game changer for multiple damage dealer teams. Ruan Mei's buffs would count for the whole team and had no conditions. They had 100% uptime and gave a massive damage increase to the overall team damage, while providing some personal damage herself. Ruan Mei will also give resistance penetration, which helped characters fight enemies that they were not particularly strong into. Lastly, Ruan Mei giving speed could allow your characters to be built on Gamma Planar set. All you needed was speed boost to have met the first half of the passive. That simulated universe world was just so Trailblazer power efficient. The overall damage gaps between hypercarry and the quirky teams such as follow-up attack would begin to become a lot more narrow. It wouldn't be until the release of Aventurine to really put the team into the position in which it went onto the radar for everyone. Aventurine releasing in the second half of 2.2 was the epitome of a Penacony character. This planet features a multitude of power creep characters, Aventurine being no exception. For the follow-up attack team specifically, there is no other option that even came close to his performance. Aventurine had a crucial debuff on the ultimate, which helped Dr. Ratio consistently get his follow-up attacks and meet his damage boosting passive. The debuff placed also increased the crit damage of attacks hitting that specific enemy, which gave everyone in the team extra damage. Aventurine being a defensive option first and foremost gave a team-wide shield that would reset upon a follow-up attack, and at the same time would easily proc with the existence of Topaz and Dr. Ratio in the team, giving most stacks with their built-in follow-up attacks. Since Aventurine also had a follow-up attack, he would give more action forward for Numby, increasing Topaz's damage even further, and lastly, all of the buffs and debuffs within the team composition. Aventurine had a lot of personal damage to add to the overall team damage ceiling. Being much more easier to build than sub-DPS Fu Xuan was a specialty with the nearly 50% crit rate he received for free. What made this overloaded kit perfectly balanced was the fact that the effortlessly functionality was dependent on the follow-up attack team, and in every other team comp, he was just your regular defensive option. These events would lead us to where we are today, present-day Honkai Star Rail. Robin would be the complete puzzle piece to the follow-up attack team at the time of my recording. Typically, I delayed the video by a bit, but we all know how powerful she'll be as a best in slot ally for the follow-up attack archetype. Giving team-wide attack and crit damage is no joke. Resistance penetration and action forwarding for the team? That's exactly what every character in Team Comp needs. Being able to speed up their follow-up attacks will effectively raise that damage ceiling more. This team would feel much like the completed version of the Dot team following the release of Black Swan, or the full Quantum team with Sparkle. For once, we could say that the damage ceilings between Hypercarry and follow-up attacks wouldn't be big enough to stop this quirky team from finding its place into the meta, and this is the history of the follow-up archetype. Now before we do it in the video, there will be one last character that is affiliated with the IPC known as Jade. With that being said, it's likely she'll have some synergy with Topaz. The question is, will she prove to be a better option compared to the free Doctor ratio we were given? The reality of the situation is, considering we now have the best in slot Harmony and preservation characters for the team, going forward you'd just be looking to replace a second damage dealer to Topaz. Maybe that'll be for elemental coverage. What I do know is the IPC can't keep getting away with this. Making their characters look this good is a crime in itself. Next offense, I'll force them to come home without taking too much of my gacha currency. So there you have it. What was once a character in Team Comp that felt doomed at the start has now begun to bloom. If I knew what I know now, I definitely would have saved more Jades for Robin because I'm so screwed. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you Loopbar for sponsoring today's video, and have a nice rest of your day.